Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. Let's all practice waving. It's great to see you all. Thanks for being here. My name is Charity Counts, and I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Midwest Museums. As we begin today's program, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have historically been and continue to be the stewards of the land we today call the Midwest. While we are gathered here for this event virtually, each of us joins from the unceded land of Indigenous peoples. Because many of us are located in Chicago today, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox, also call this area home. I wish to acknowledge the strength and resilience of these and all Indigenous peoples who have endured and continue to steward the land that I am privileged to call home, that we are all privileged to call home. They do this in spite of the devastation of their land and lives as a result of colonialism and misrepresentation of their cultures and heritage across time, including by museums. In addition to giving our respect for these and all Indigenous peoples and ancestors of this place we call home, consider this acknowledgement a commitment on behalf of AMM to continue to learn about and to build relationships with the many Indigenous communities and cultural organizations and communities they serve in the Midwest. Now, for a few housekeeping notes. We encourage you to keep your video on, but your audio muted for this program. You may choose to post comments or questions in the chat. At one point in the program, we'll actually have a conversation with our recipient today, and you'll be able to ask questions that we can share with her at that time. We also welcome you to share your reactions. You can use the reactions in Zoom, the feature where you click and it shows on screen, or you can snap your fingers and clap. Even though we can't hear you, we can see you. We appreciate your participation and your response. For those of you who are getting to know AMM today for the first time, I wanted to take a moment to give a little bit of background on our organization and this program. Founded in 1927, we are one of the very first museum associations in the United States. Our focus for 93 years has been on connecting individuals and organizations within our profession and supporting their work through capacity building programs and resources. We serve an 8-state region, but our membership extends far beyond the Midwest. And our community includes traditional museums and historic sites, as well as art and cultural centers, science centers, zoos, and libraries. This year has been challenging, but it has also invited creativity on many levels. The AMM Awards program is no exception. For decades, we have offered an in-person awards program and took the opportunity presented this year to try something completely different. It's exciting for us to be able to celebrate today's recipient at our second event in a series of virtual community celebrations. We're also happy to be here along with their neighbors and colleagues. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. I would now like to take a moment to introduce our presenters and guests. Please wave when I introduce you. Joining me is the Vice President of the AMM Board of Directors and Chicago-based public historian and curator, Jennifer Scott. Jennifer also serves on our awards committee. Also joining us are additional members of the AMM Board of Directors. I saw Greg Whitcop, Leslie Wright, Whitney Owens, Katie Van Allen, Kate Kaczynski, Brenda Rainey, and there are probably others I can't see on my screen at this moment. We have so many people on today. Our guest of honor this afternoon is Heather Miller, Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago. And finally, I'd like to introduce, I wanted to really highlight two other people who are going to be part of our program today, Andrew Leith and Peter Vega from the Chicago Cultural Alliance. And then finally, we'll introduce our sponsor. Joining us from Catalog It is Joy Tan Rodell. Catalogue is our awards program series sponsor. The team at Catalogue has been very active in AMM the last few years, and we're grateful that they've provided resources to make this virtual series possible. Please join me in a round of applause in appreciation for their support, and also to welcome Joy to offer brief remarks.
Thank you, Charity. Again, I'm Joy Tahan-Rudell, Director of Museums and Collections at Catalogue. We are proud to be sponsoring the AMM Awards program, and I'm happy to be virtually part of it with you. I also want to congratulate today's Promising Leadership Award recipient, Heather Miller, Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago and board member of the Chicago Cultural Alliance. When researching Heather, one thing became very clear. Everyone is quite taken by Heather's drive, passion, and vision for Native advocacy. Congratulations again, Heather, for an outstanding job of advocating for and uplifting your staff. We are all inspired by your commitment to your community as well as your determination and leadership. And thank you again, Charity, for all of your support for all of these award winners and for this awards program.
Thank you, Joy. All right, now it's time for the awards presentation. To present Heather her award today is Jennifer Scott.
Thank you, Charity, and welcome everyone. It's so good to see so many colleagues, familiar faces pop up on Zoom. I have the honor of presenting the Promising Leadership Award. This award is for individuals who have worked or volunteered for a museum or a museum association for 10 years or less and provided exceptional service, demonstrated leadership skills on projects and among teams, or showed outstanding commitment to the field. Through the Promising Leadership Award, we recognize some of our profession's newest additions whose exceptional service and leadership have stood out among others. The 2020 recipient of this award, I'm proud to announce, is one of my colleagues in Chicago, Heather Miller, Executive Director of the American Indian Center of Chicago. Heather serves actively in a variety of capacities in Chicago, and I believe Heather has the award with her, so feel free to Heather, show off your award. I don't know if you can get it close up in there. Do your best. It's a beautiful Prism Award while I continue to brag about you. I'm lucky here in Chicago to serve on 2 city advisory councils that Heather also is a member on. One is the Cultural Advisory Committee, which advises the city on arts and culture, and Chicago's newest Monuments and Memorial Advisory Committee that was created to reassess the city's public art collection. And already I've had the privilege to learn so much from Heather. She continues, as Joy said, to be a needed voice and strong advocate for Indigenous rights and for the creation of more inclusive histories within the museum field and beyond. For this award, Heather was nominated by her peers in the Chicago Cultural Alliance for her efforts to ensure financial stability for the American Indian Center, an important cultural institution that I'm sure you'll hear more about today, while finding new innovative ways to engage the many diverse communities that they serve. And normally I would read some of the nominators' comments, but we have the nominators here. So I'm going to pass it over to my dear friends and colleagues from the Chicago Cultural Alliance, Andrew Leaf and Peter Vega. Congratulations, Heather.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. I know I had some issues with this earlier. Are we good?
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. All right, so it really is a pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Andrew Leaf. I'm the Director of Cultural Programs and Museum Practice at the Chicago Cultural Alliance. We are a consortium of over 40 cultural heritage centers, museums, and historical societies across the Chicagoland area. Our mission is to connect, promote, and support centers of cultural heritage for a more vibrant and inclusive region. Speaking on behalf of my wonderful colleagues at the Alliance, it truly was an honor to nominate Heather Miller, the Executive Director of the American Indian Center Chicago, for the Promising Leadership Award. Our decision to nominate Heather was both unanimous and heartfelt. I myself have participated in American Indian Center events since about 2007. So 13 years, it's really hard to believe. It's been wonderful for me to see the center grow, especially under Heather's leadership over the past 3 years. We at the Alliance are really incredibly impressed by Heather's tireless efforts to advocate for, uplift, and support her colleagues at the center, as well as her community. Heather is also the first person to volunteer to collaborate in a Chicago Cultural Alliance intercultural event or to work with Chicago in public schools. She has been instrumental in sharing the AIC's mission, serving their elders, and guiding the organization in their efforts to persevere despite the many challenges of COVID-19. Heather Miller truly is an inspiration, a visionary, and a leader in our community, most deserving of this recognition.
Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate you sharing some of the reasons why you nominated Heather for today. And Heather, we now invite you to share your thoughts as recipient of this award. Please join me in a round of applause as we bring Heather.
Thank you all so much. This is this is so exciting. I'm speechless for once. I think that might come as a shock to a lot of you. A lot of my colleagues. No, I do not shut up. So to be speechless is pretty incredible. This really, I'm not crying, I swear.
It's okay if you are.
So before I get started, I do just want to take a moment and center ourselves real quick. And I do want to, of course, always say thank you to our Potawatomi brothers and sisters who are the original owners and landholders of this place that I'm sitting in today. I also, before I start, want to say, just take a few minutes, a real quick second or two, to remember that our community is alive and proud, and we have many things that happen here on a regular basis. And just in the last couple of days, we had a pretty major event happen in our community. We had a passing of a very important person due to COVID. So even before I say anything else, I just want to take a really quick moment for us to all just reflect on the Native people who would have called our areas home that we're all living in and sharing this conversation in, but then also just take a minute to reflect on our community that you might be in yourself, and remember all the important folks who have helped get us here to this day today, and just remember them real quick. So I'm just going to take a quick moment of silence and then we'll get started again. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for my moment. When I heard that I was getting this award, this was really an exciting possibility. I don't consider myself an advocate in the museum field necessarily, just because of the work that we do at the American Indian Center. I'm really excited to be able to share more about the Indian Center here in Chicago and share about what we do, and talk a little bit about why I am being honored from a museum point of view. So here in Chicago, we're actually one of the oldest urban Indian centers in the country. American Indian Center here was founded in the early 50s when one of the pieces of legislation being passed through Congress was called relocation. So this was another form of genocidal programs designed to remove Indians. And so what was happening was Indians were coming here to the city. Chicago was one of 5 relocation cities. And so after many years of removing Indians and getting us out of here, we were suddenly told to come right back and start up new lives in the city. Well, many folks that arrived here didn't have access to the same resources as others. And so the American Indian Center was founded as a way to help provide those resources to the community. We needed a place to practice our heritage, to practice our traditions. And so the Indian Center was born. We have always served in that role as being the conduit between our Native community as well as a non-Native community. And currently, we provide programming in the areas of arts, education, and we still do a little social service work to harken back to our founding and to what that looks like. Things have really changed for us in the pandemic, and I think as we go through some of our questions and through some of our discussion today, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But for me, in this position and in this work, I really see all of this coming into fruition in a modern, contemporary time, and in a way that really questions and turns the idea of museums on its head, because we're still a living, breathing cultural group that still celebrates our history and brings that to the forefront every day through our programs and through the services that we offer for our community. But it also highlights some of the history that we struggle with and that we still deal with as a Native community, and that forces us to think about how we interact, in contemporary society, and what this looks like for, various committees that we may serve on, or how we work specifically within our own community. So I will stop there, and then I think some folks have some questions for me, so we'll move into that.
Thank you, Heather, and congratulations again. We are so excited to be awarding this recognition to you, and to learn from you. I think it's already been a learning experience for me. I know Jennifer mentioned that for herself as well. Just getting to know you over the last 4 weeks has been wonderful. So just to fill everybody in, what we decided to do with today's program is to have a conversation with Heather. So Peter and Andrew from the Chicago Cultural Alliance and I have prepared a few questions related to some particular topics we thought would be interesting to hear from Heather about. But we absolutely welcome questions from you as we talk about these subjects, or anything else you may wonder about with the American Indian Center in Chicago, but post them in the chat. And then we'll try to get to those questions as soon as we can. I'm going to start with one thing that I've learned about you in the last few weeks. You shared that you have a passion for contemporary arts specifically, and has sort of become a driving force behind the work that you're doing at the American Indian Center. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that passion has influenced your work and the projects that you've organized.
Absolutely. So one of the things that really drives me in this position, and just generally, is the fact that I wake up every day, no matter what, being an Indigenous person. That means I get up and I think about, how am I connected to the land today? How am I representing my relationships with this area that I call home, but also the plants, the animals, the air, the resources around me? And that truly is what defines me as my individual person. So then when I think about what that looks like in my workplace setting, and when I think about that from a programmatic perspective, that means, what do I do in this position to help bring that art factor into this way of being, in this connection with the land? And so for many times, or the way I explain this is that as a Native person, art is literally my life, because art is connected to the land for us as Indigenous people. It's every single thing about who we are. So I'll illustrate this by something many Native women will sit here and maybe even have Zoom conversations about, but my earrings. So as I'll pull them out today. So I love these because these are just an awesome, beautiful piece of artwork. But not only what you see on these earrings is that this is painted birch bark. So this is a natural form of being in connection with the land. I've got birch bark on my earrings. And these are little blueberries, so they connect me to a resource that would be here. It's representing of that fact of being in relationship, and it's every single thing about who I am as a Native person. It's this art. It's this way of
I saw a note from your daughter, so call her and ask her how she got on, okay?
Mom, can you mute yourself?
Yeah.
Mom, mute yourself.
But,
cool. That's my mom. Hi, Mom.
I'm so glad she can be here.
That's pretty great. Thanks, Mom. So every single part of who I am being is in relationship with the land. So my earrings, my art behind me, I'll translate into that relationship of being an Indigenous person. And so when we think about what contemporary life is now, living in this modern society, what does contemporary Native art look like? I mean, I think that my earrings, my jewelry, my clothing are great representative or great examples of that, but we also have to think much bigger. We have to think of modern contemporary Native art as a form of our own survival. This is going to be what carries us on into the future. It's going to be our way of making sure that our culture continues and it thrives. We're going to need to find those ways to not only conserve our natural resources, to make sure that we have birch bark in the future to make more earrings, but we also need to figure out what this looks like in terms of finding ways to carry on these ideas of our own culture and our heritage through what is really cool but Native art.
Wow, thank you, Heather. It's interesting to think about the power of the arts carrying us into the future, and particularly for Indigenous peoples. I think that it's really interesting to think about. Thank you. I know that I don't see any new questions popping up in the chat, so I just want to mention that I'll keep watching there, but I know that Andrew has a question for you next.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I had the privilege of attending a recent discussion that you led with the Field Museum about land acknowledgement. I know that that is a subject of conversation that many folks are interested in right now, and I know, Heather, that you have been fielding just a ton of questions on this. So, I know you've invested a great deal of thought and energy into exposing a broader public to the significance and responsibility of land acknowledgements. I'd love to know what the response has been and how we can ensure that land acknowledgements remain earnest, more than just lip service, and really a gateway to an equitable relationship with First People, not simply an end in and of themselves.
Land acknowledgements. So for those folks that maybe have not seen my conversation with the Field Museum, I have a love-hate relationship with land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements are one of the greatest things ever because they harken back to a traditional practice for us as Native folks. No matter what, we would have at some point acknowledged our relatives, our our other relations, we would have acknowledged the land. We would have recognized where we are, no matter what time period we were thinking about. So land acknowledgements have always happened. We've always done that. That's just a cultural practice. But now, as folks are starting to see this and understand more about land acknowledgements, oftentimes they're turning into somewhat of a performative nature. And so when I do work with different organizations and institutions, it's incredibly important to make sure that we underscore that this is more than just a written statement that you put on a plaque and never look at ever again in your institution. This has to be about a long-term relationship with a Native community, with a Native person, with a Native entity. It's more than just taking those words or taking that practice and putting it up on your wall. It's about figuring out ways to permanently engage with the Native community. That means bringing them into advisory committees. That means bringing their perspective into meetings. That means building positions within your institutions and with your organizations for Native people to have leadership, to have their voices heard at the decision-making table. This means that you're finding ways to make your spaces safe for Native people. This means that you are finding ways to make sure that Native artists, Native entrepreneurs, that their businesses are being supported by your organization and by your entities. All of these things are ways to build relationships with your Native community. So you're doing more than just acknowledging the land, but you're actually practicing the beliefs that you have of respecting and understanding the relationship that Native people have with their areas and with your institutions in particular. So I know Andrea who's on our call today, she loves to remind folks that I like to say that land acknowledgements are just one teeny little foot in the door. It's one little step. It's not the end all be all of your relationship piece. And they should be living, they should be breathing. You should be looking at your land acknowledgement every single month, every single week, every single day and saying, oh, is this still right? Have we learned anything different? Have we made any changes to this? Or is this still okay? Are we still in the right relationship with Native people? And are they still feeling comfortable with what we're doing to make sure that their voices are at the table?
Well, thank you, Heather. Great points. I see some comments in the chat that you'll have to read through. Lots of support for what you're saying. And again, on the list of things that I've learned from you myself. So I can attest, to having watched that wonderful conversation with the Field Museum. And I highly recommend folks follow the link that's in the chat to check that out.
I'm just gonna drop another link in the chat because we get asked this all the time for good resources and where folks can go to find, so I get asked all the time for resources and where people can go to find more information about land acknowledgements. And there are lots of resources out there, but I should have had this up and ready to go beforehand. But this is a map that I've been sharing with folks to help them gain a better sense of what tribal nations would have called their areas home. So I just threw that in the chat for folks to take a look at too.
Thank you, Heather. Then we did get a question
over other resources that are out there right now. I know that there's one that a lot of folks are using. It's like nativeland.ca. That's a good one, but that has some historical issues that I think need to be addressed with that particular site. But this one that I just sent is from the Library of Congress, and this is looking at the actual judicially established Indian land. So this is specifically through treaties and what has been ceded and what would have been specific territories prior to, or, you know, in relation to various treaty making pieces that have happened. So that's why I like that one.
That's great. It's a great resource. Thank you for posting that in the chat. We did get a question in the chat for you related to this topic. It says the Native community, like some other communities in Chicago, navigates an interesting tension between contemporary and traditional, analog and digital, future and past, and is comprised of multiple members. How do you navigate that boundary, and how do you use the AIC as a space for a community that is complex, even as it is positioned as monolithic? That's a hard question. That's a big one.
It's Hillish. What do you expect? I don't expect anything else from him. He already knows the answer to this question too, so whatever, Hillish.
I think we'll all benefit from the answer.
Well, I navigate that boundary very finely, very nimbly on tiptoes most days. So what I didn't say, talking about the AIC, is that as this community center, we serve about 100 different tribal nations. We serve about 100 tribal nations in this community. And so that means that we've got a lot of opinions. We have a lot of different ideas about how programs should be run, how I should even be doing my job. And I think it's important to remember that not only are all these points are incredibly valuable and incredibly important, and they all need to be respected and brought to the table, but everybody needs to have their voices heard, no matter what, at the end of the day. And I think that it's really, really important to make sure that folks are given time to be heard, to be listened to, and that they're participating in things that are important to them. I think that I tend to see AIC as a space for community, in that we do a lot of different opportunities and engagement pieces to make sure that we do find ways for all 100 of those tribal nations to feel like they are connected. So, you know, for some folks that might be going downtown to protest during these really interesting times and making sure that their voices are heard using that platform. And so as an organization that is speaking for Native rights and wants to make sure that our voices are heard, we're able to offer or provide space for those type of activities to happen. But then if folks like our membership or members of our community want to sit back and maybe write an op-ed to the paper and use resources from the Indian Center to help make that happen, then we're able to provide that space as well. So it's really being flexible in terms of dealing with all of those different needs that come to the table and finding the right ways to make sure that we're providing folks with those resources and that they do feel like they are being heard and that they are being recognized. I'm not saying that I do that well all the time, every single day, but I try. So I think that's one way, but also I want to address the monolithic piece there too within that question, because I think one of the ways that I want to make sure that we deal with this issue is that we are seen as a community as a living, breathing, very active community, and that we do represent all of these different beliefs and opinions. I mean, I think that that's how we transition from being this, you know, one stereotyped American Indian coverall into highlighting the fact that we are members of all these different tribal nations with a variety of different customs, of beliefs, of backgrounds. And so even though sometimes it is tough and frustrating and hard to deal with everybody, I'm still going to love them no matter what, because they do represent another piece and another facet that truly makes us that really amazing, diverse Native community that is not monolithic and that is still living and breathing and loving our heritage and our histories.
Thank you, Heather. I believe Peter has a question that is a nice segue here, just talking about
the cultural, the cultural projects that you work on, or that you've worked on at the American Indian Center. But first, I want to congratulate you, Heather, because this is such an exciting moment to be honoring you. And congratulations on this. And I want to acknowledge that obviously the American Indian Center of Chicago it wouldn't be considered what we would think as a traditional museum space. But going to the American Indian Center and familiarizing yourself with the space, you find why this space feels that it has that same presence as a museum. They have a great exhibition space. They have beautiful programming space. It is, in essence, an art center as well. And I just want to say that there is so much to be learned from the work at the American Indian Center for the museum community as a whole, and how the American Indian Center and the work of Heather engages the Indigenous community. I think we should look to that as a way of how all museums should be engaging with their communities in supporting their work through social justice, social services. There's so many other ways that museums can be active, especially now. And that's truly what I believe that the American Indian Center does and has done for much longer than this moment that we're in. So I encourage you to look more closely at the work of the American Indian Center as a model for how museums can work. And because of that, Heather, you've done amazing work in collaboration with although challenging, with the city of Chicago and Chicago Public Schools to help with the work of bringing forward Indigenous Peoples Day as a prominent day in Chicago Public Schools specifically. Can you tell us a little bit more about that work?
Chicago is an interesting city. Chicago really loves its Columbus history, as I'm now starting to really find out. We can talk about how gross that is offline at any point in time. That's fine. I'll just put a pin in that. We'll save that for later. But understanding the ramifications of the narrative of Columbus founding America and what that looks like, we as a Native community understand that then decentralizes our history and puts us in a very different point of historical presence within the founding of America's own narrative. And so that's where that becomes problematic. So when we think about what we want our future to look like, and when we think about what's important for this history and this new time period, I think it's really important for us to remember that we're on Indian land. This has always been Indian land, and therefore it's important to change this narrative that we're being fed in schools and we're being fed in just our general lives daily. I think we all, I know me, grew up singing in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And let's not say that anymore, because I know where my people came from. I know that we've always been here. I know our stories. I know that they center us in this land, in this region in particular. And so having that connection then doesn't really match up with Columbus. And so I think that it's really important that we start changing that narrative. So one of the things that we took on at the Indian Center was actually changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And we've been working with the city, with the county, and now with the state. But we really first started working with CPS, or Chicago Public Schools, for those not in Chicago, to make that change. So we spent lots of time at school board meetings, talking to school board officials, finding community folks to help advocate and to carry out this campaign. And we also found support in our local organizations as well. I mean, a lot of this couldn't have been done without our amazing youth and, you know, our friends at the Chinese Nations Youth Group. I mean, they've been central in all of this work as well. And I want to make sure that they're recognized for their important contributions. But I'm sorry, I do not mean to say a but to negate their work. I'm saying a but to transition into another sentence. But I'm very cognizant of the language that I use. So when we started looking at CPS, we realized that this could be an easy change, because what we saw in the leadership at the board level was they wanted to see a better understanding of Chicago history. So Chicago and American history in general. So we were able to advocate on behalf of that holiday name change just by simply stating facts, by bringing people to the table to share their own experiences, to talk about the effects of this holiday on the psyche of Native people, and especially our Native kids in school. You know, I don't have kids myself, but I hear from our youth that come into the center all the time, talking about how frustrating it is to go to school and see, you know, images of local sports teams mascots, or to hear about Columbus, or to not have their tribal histories discussed in their curriculums. And so we think that by changing this particular holiday, that's one tiny little step towards correcting that much larger historical problem that we have within our educational system. So if we can get folks to just start thinking about the fact that Native folks have always been here, we're still here, we're not going anywhere, and we're going to be better and cooler as time goes on, then we can start reframing and recharacterizing and having a much more inclusive narrative of the history of all of us.
I'm sure that the partnership with the school system was not an easy one. And all partnerships require effort. We have a question in the chat from Jennifer, actually, just about other partnerships. Like, do you have an example of a partnership that maybe is a good model for museums? Maybe it was working with a museum that you consider to be effective, or I guess a good example of what other museums might try to pursue.
Not to answer for Heather, but I do think that Heather, I'd love you to talk a little bit about, because the perfect example of that in working with neighborhoods and cities is the Walking Museum that the American Indian Center created. I think that would help us answer that question.
Absolutely. So I will say that real quickly, I think this is a great plug for all the local Chicago museums to strengthen their relationships with Native communities, because I don't think that a lot of our organizations and institutions and museums here in the city are doing a super stellar job. I think we're getting there. We're taking small steps, but there's still a lot of work that needs to happen locally. And probably even with folks here on this call, there's probably still stuff that needs to happen within your own institutions. I'll throw that out there. We've not decolonized ourselves yet. I don't think we're ever going to decolonize ourselves, but we can take steps to get there. So I think the more that we can aim to take steps to decolonize ourselves and decolonize our museum practices, the better. So when we think about, that's a good question. I got distracted by the chat. So when we think about what a good museum practice looks like, and when we think about what are appropriate ways to work within a Native community and recognize this history, I do love the fact that our walking museum is a really awesome project. And I should also say, we've rebranded ourselves too. So in the last couple of months, we have changed our name from the Northwest Portage Walking Museum to 4000 North, and I'll explain why. So what we now know as 4000 North is a community-centered history and contemporary art, outdoor entertainment, educational tour or trail. Yeah, we'll say trail. It is designed to connect the Chicago River and the Des Plaines River together via Irving Park Road. So for folks not in Chicago, we here in Chicago love our neighborhoods. We really have senses of pride in terms of where it is that we live within the city and what connects us to that particular place. Specifically here in Chicago, a lot of neighborhoods are very centered around particular races or ethnicities of folks as well. And so that also brings certain neighborhood pride into these situations. So our 4000 North is working specifically here on the north side of Chicago and around this particular road, Irving Park Road. We are also here in Chicago lovers of our grid system, and we like to name things according to our grid system, hence the change to 4000 North. If you look on a map, Irving Park Road is the 4000 block. So this is all about wayfinding. So we wanted to center the wayfinding piece, and we are talking about the north side, so 4000 North. So you know exactly where we're located on a map when you think of that term. But since we're locating ourselves in this particular spot, we're also locating ourselves within the river ecology and within the river system here. We wanted to also locate the project within a Native history. So we start with public art pieces that are built at both river locations. When we started the project it's been in the works for several years, but officially, 3 years ago, we received our first grant and we were able to start building public art and producing work around this walking museum. So we wanted to center the Native story first. We wanted to bookend the project with the Native history. So we chose a local artist named Santiago X to work with our community and do community design workshops. So we brought in our youth, and Santiago comes from a mound building culture. We also know here in this area, tribes that historically called this area home were also mound builders. So we wanted to harken back to that tradition and to help bring that back to fruition. So we created these mounds, or Santiago helped design these mounds. We've built one. We're fundraising for the next one. Folks can check out our GoFundMe page and make donations to our walking museum so that way we can build our second mound. I'm happy to send out a link to that as well following all of this presentation today. And we want to also tell the history of the communities that lived here and that still live here. So through engagement with our steering committee, we've been able to record interviews from different communities. We're building up our website to share these stories with other folks. We're constantly building public art. So we've got our 2 mounds. We also have another piece of public art that we've built at the Dunning-Reed mental health facility that shows the internal structure of a willow tree and how it breathes underwater with its root systems. So that way folks get an idea of the natural history of this area through a nature inspired public art piece, but it also connects to a very important piece within a Native history and something that we use for a lot of traditional ceremonies and for practices, a willow tree. So we wanted to be able to highlight that and share that with the community. We'd like to eventually have field trips for students to take and to learn more about the ways that they can engage with the 4000 North. Just didn't happen this year because of COVID, but we've been building and making all of those resources possible for when we are able to gather again. And just figuring out ways, again, to share that history, bring in a community voice, and really rethink what museums can be and what we can do as local community individuals to really build up community stories and share from that perspective, and really rethink what monuments should be celebrated and built as we navigate during these really tumultuous times that we're living in.
Thank you, Heather. I had a couple questions come through in the chat I want to take a moment to address. First one, on the lighter side, I think. Could you tell us a little bit more about the painting that's behind you?
This one, I just happened to, I've had this one for several years. I won this at an art auction a long time ago. This is done by a Chippewa Cree artist from Montana. If you get up really closely, it's done in dot style, so it actually looks like it's beadwork. And then this is pretty cool because the floral pattern on here very much looks like a woodlands floral pattern that would be located here in this particular area. But the florals on the bottom of the painting also are the florals on the horse's regalia. So it just has a nice like balance and symmetry and whatnot to it. It's just one of my favorite pieces. I got it for a deal. I should have paid more.
So then the bigger question that came through the chat was, if you weren't having to spend your time fighting all the wrongs, what would your vision for Chicago be? And also, when are you going to run for mayor or president?
If I wasn't fighting for all the wrongs, well, that actually is my vision of Chicago. It is to erase all the wrongs. So my vision of Chicago would be that we do have a really positive understanding of how this city engages with its Native community and with Native history. I would love to see a place that represents and recognizes tribal sovereignty and understands what that means and lives it every single day. I would like to live in a community that that understands that it has a very unique relationship. Stop with the politics, guys. Oh my gosh. It has a really unique relationship with, I do want to run for the 38th ward because he's pissing me off. But he said the wrong language today. But sorry guys, something terrible happened in Chicago. We haven't, okay, I'll put a pin in my little comment because somebody said something that is driving me nuts. So we have an alderman here in the city who's Italian and really loves the Columbus statues and really likes to fight with me all the time. And today in a city council meeting, he called the protesters who were trying to take down the Columbus statue savages. We don't do that. We don't do that. So someone's just asking me to run for his ward. So yes, I absolutely would do that because he does not need to be alderman anymore. We don't call people savages. That's
no.
We don't do that.
I'm hearing comments, he needs to go. He needs to go. Well, I know we've just got a few minutes left in our time, and Andrew has hopefully a quick question just about some of the other work that the center does, and then I'm hopeful that before we go today, we can get a chance to hear from your folks while they're on. Okay, Andrew.
All right, I'll try to be brief. So, we at Chicago Cultural Alliance are so honored to have Heather as a board member, and our board and our staff have discussed what resilience is, especially in this particular moment in time, and how our museums and cultural centers have always been sources of resilience for our communities, and how that role has grown and changed in this moment. So I would love to know from you, Heather, how the center is a source of resilience for your community. And maybe how you've experienced resilience a bit yourself in this moment.
We are resilient because for the last 68 years, we have kept our doors open and operating no matter what crazy stuff gets thrown at us. I mean, I cannot think of anything else that defines resilience more than that. I think that the fact that we can be, flexible enough to change with the needs of our community, the fact that we can really pivot to offer services that are meeting needs of the community, that's resilience. The fact that we as Native people, we wake up every single day also as Indigenous, but we also wake up in a genocidal state. We know that genocide against Native folks still continues to this day. And so the fact that we get up, we continue to do this work, we continue to fight for our sovereign rights, we continue to fight for our culture, we continue to serve our community, all of that is resilience, all of that is survival, all of that is making sure that we continue and that we thrive no matter what, because we're not going to let the system overtake us. At the end of the day, we're still Indigenous. We are still connected to this land. We are the caretakers of this place, and we can't go away. So that will forever keep us connected here, and that will be our resilience at the end of the day.
Thank you, Heather and Andrew. So before we go to our closing, I would love to offer an opportunity to your mother and father to say a few words if they would like. I don't know if we can get them unmuted here.
Yeah, there you go. There we are.
You must be so proud.
I just want to say that it's been very interesting listening to my daughter talk about issues that have meant so much to her since she popped out of the womb. That child has always been so passionate, a passionate person. She took on my father's family's history on her own and has delved into issues that my father would never, ever, ever talk about. He was too embarrassed to be Native. And so she has carried on, and it's not interesting. It is heart-rending to see that she uses her God-given talents to create and sustain her passion, and has helped so many other people along the way find their passion involved in her passion. And so that's exciting. Very exciting.
To me, reviving or keeping alive culture is important in that it is satisfying to learn and to be a part of it, that you couldn't be a part of it if there weren't anything like somebody making it available or making it known. It's such a wonderful thing to see in Chicago, to see this, because the history is so rich and so few people have any idea of the history. And I think that's really important. It's, you know, you travel. I mean, we're from Florida. We've been up to Chicago twice, but it gives you something to do and to ruminate about, to think and to understand where our history comes from and what people, I mean, inmates, for instance, prisoners suffer. So many people suffer, and it's so dominated by one particular class of people, and there is persecution, but just to keep it alive and keep people aware of what's happening is very important. I think Heather has really done a very significant thing for that, a very significance. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much to Heather's parents for taking a moment to share their thoughts with us. I would like to just invite everyone for this moment to unmute and clap so Heather can hear us after hearing everything she shared today, but also all of her kind words from her folks. Heather, we're so proud of you and so excited to honor you today. We have one last special surprise for everyone on our event today. Thanks to Heather and her colleagues. And I'm going to invite Andrew one more time to make an introduction of our special guest to help us wrap up our event here. And then I will ask that that Heather and Peter and Andrew and Jennifer stay on after the close of the event for a Zoom photo. And Mom and Dad, you can stay on too if you want.
All right. Well, it is my honor to introduce our friend Dave Spencer, the arts coordinator at the American Indian Center and an enrolled member of the Choctaw and Dene Nations. He is going to be sharing our outro song tonight.
Congrats, Heather.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dave, for being here. All right, that concludes our event today. Thank you all. And again, Heather and Jennifer, Andrew, Peter, and Heather's parents, please stay on. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Love you, girl.
Mwah.